Our streaming is once again having technical difficulties, but we will go ahead and I will call to order the June 2nd meeting of the Monmouth City Council. And I will note again that this is being recorded. We do have folks have the ability to call in, and public comments were available to be taken in advance. So once again, in our new sort of way of doing things, I will ask for Phyllis Bowman to take the roll call, please.
Councillor Beltz.
Present.
Councillor Carey.
Here.
Councillor Lopez.
Here.
Councillor Sharmer.
Here.
Councillor Schinkel.
Here.
Councillor Silbernagel.
Here.
Mayor Kuntz.
I'm here. And if you would all rise, I'm going to ask our police chief, Daryl Talon, to lead us in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for
which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
Tonight, we have a consent calendar that consists of the minutes of the meeting of May 19th. And if there are any corrections to note, please note. Otherwise, we will have a motion to accept them as presented.
I move to approve them as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Silbernagel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Lopez. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much for that. We have a lot of items on our business agenda tonight, and then including several hearings and adopting our 2021 budget. Then we will have an urban renewal agency meeting to do the same sort of work. And then after that, we will go into executive session as the urban renewal agency. And I will read that meeting script when we get to that. So to start off, as we have gone into our phase 1 reopening here in Polk County, I am pleased to see our businesses opening up, much more activity in our streets and in our community. We were able to welcome Tractor Supply, who opened over the weekend as well. And so many good things are happening as we start to look at how to safely navigate the loosening of our health restrictions, but still be very mindful of our neighbors. It's still really important. We have a lot of vulnerable folks in our community, and I hope everyone will join me in being cautious and careful in how you present yourself in our community for their sake as well as your own. But glad to see things get back a little bit to the way they were. Unfortunately, there are some national events now that have taken place on top of the suffering of folks from this pandemic. And I would like to take a moment to say something about that. And I imagine some of you may as well once we get to the council comments. Difficult conversations are happening, and they are extremely important about the way that people, and particularly people of color, are treated in our community, in our state, and across our nation. And I hope that We will be able to continue to have these conversations. I had a meeting yesterday with Mayor John McArdle, as well as Police Chief Daryl Talon and Independence Police Chief Bob Mason. And both of our departments have expressed their deep emotions about the situation that has happened with George Floyd and his death at the hands of a police officer. You will be seeing and hearing more to come. Monmouth and Independence will be working together and getting the voices in our community who have felt these things, who know these things, who we need to hear from. We will be gathering people together soon. And again, it will be across our community. We will have support from Western Oregon University, and we will be making sure that these kinds of things are not tolerated in our community. I would like to call Chief Talon up. He did release a statement, and I would like him to share that with us now. Chief?
Thank you, Mayor Kuntz and members of the council. I appreciate you allowing me to take just a few minutes of your time this evening. I know that you're all aware that I issued a public statement yesterday morning, which was shared with you directly and also with the public. This evening, I'd like to read that statement in order to make sure that it becomes part of the permanent record of this meeting. This is a statement from the Monmouth Police Department dated May 31st, 2020. The Monmouth Police Department values the long-standing trust and support that it has been provided to us by our community members. We stand united with police agencies across Oregon in condemning the recent actions of Minneapolis police officers that resulted in the tragic death of George Floyd. Monmouth police officers value human life and are trained to do everything in our power to help and to listen to everyone we encounter. We take an oath and are sworn to protect all people in need, no matter the circumstances. Monmouth police officers consistently demonstrate our core values during every encounter with the public. We are committed to serving with integrity, and we respect the rights of all those who live, work, visit, or attend school in Monmouth. We are public servants that remain dedicated to our mission of providing the highest quality of professional law enforcement services to every community member. That's signed by me, Chief Daryl Talon. And just a few comments that I'd like to give tonight. What's happening right now in our nation and even internationally right now, I believe is something that we all need to listen to. I also believe that change needs to occur, and each of us, and I mean all members of our community, bear the responsibility to make sure that that change happens. I want to assure the members of the council and all members of our community that you have a good police department made up of dedicated and professional women and men who are in this profession for the right reasons. I know that some of you have expressed interest in the last couple of days, and you have some very good questions about current Monmouth PD practices, our policies and procedures, and maybe even some questions about our recruitment and selection process, and likely probably questions especially about our training practices. What I'd like to do tonight is to ask to be placed on the work session agenda for the next council meeting held on June 16th. At that work session, with your permission, I want to spend some time going over briefly the internal workings of your police department and to take the time needed to answer any questions that you may have about the topics that I just mentioned. I want to conclude by saying I thank you very much for your support. We feel it, and it's much appreciated at this time.
So we will schedule that work session. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Chief. On June 16th, we will be able to get our questions in advance to the chief so that he can give us a thorough presentation. And of course, because it will be a public work session, we will accept public questions as well submitted in advance so that we would have time to make them part of that presentation. Again, I'll go through our business items and then have an opportunity for each of you to comment as well. But for now, are there any reports for boards and commissions? Councillor Carey.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the Planning Commission met a couple of weeks ago, May 15, and discussed a couple of items of interest. One of those items is the comprehensive plan zone change that is on our agenda tonight, and that will be fleshed out in its entirety. The other discussion that would be of interest is there was a public hearing and a design review and a bit of a variance for the what's called the Monmouth Commons, which would be the development of a 4-story building across from the current City Hall, the old neighborhood market where the food carts are right now. That is scheduled to be a 4-story development. It is designed to have commercial on the ground floor, commercial retail on the ground floor, and the next 3 floors would have residential sort of multifamily apartment style stuff. Considerable discussion was had, especially centering on parking and the impact of parking in the downtown area with what will amount to, I believe, 27 units, 27 2-bedroom units coming online. That was primarily where it was. There was a bit of other discussion regarding, the design, whether it fit in our downtown, and et cetera. But what was approved 8-1, and so that, and they made the final decision. So as I understand, the plan is to move forward. Construction could begin as early as July, and there's about an 11-month completion project or completion timeline, and so it sounds as though they're sort of off and running. So I think Suzanne is on. She could provide any of the details that might be beyond what I've described, but at any rate, forward movement on that project. That is really all that I have.
There you go.
Never mind. Sorry, thank you. Councillor Lopez, if you couldn't read my lips, did you have a report for us?
I do as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a report regarding reopening protocols as they apply to MyNet, and I'll paraphrase from a letter from MyNet's CEO Don Patton, or MyNet's president rather, Don Patton. We're happy to report that our first week of cautious reopening at MyNet has gone well. Our staff has been and continues to be unaffected by any alarming viral symptoms. The daily opening routine is already in place. Each employee has his or her temperature checked upon arrival. Readings are recorded and tracked. Masks are always worn for customer interactions, with gloves as needed. Prior to entering a customer's home, our field technicians require written confirmation validating the absence of any COVID symptoms. The backlog of service calls is being rapidly cleared, and while new installations are nearly overwhelming, our well-tuned team is managing well in spite of the volume. Minnet also looks forward to closely following all of Governor Brown's guidelines as we prepare for a move into phase 2, whenever that may be. And that is the update from Minnet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, if I'm not muted.
You are not muted.
Okay.
I put Zach in charge of the meeting.
Is there anyone else with a report? Okay, thank you. The Arts and Culture Commission had a partial meeting the other night, trying to go for another one, but unfortunately, due to a odd variety of circumstances, we're actually losing some of our Arts and Culture Commission members. So we will be looking for new members in order to carry on the work that was started with great enthusiasm. And I will have more reports on that later. Next, our interim city manager, Chad Olson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. First, I just would like to compliment Chief Talon for his statement. Monmouth Police Department is, I think the community has a great department, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate Chief Talon's statement to the community and coming to the meeting tonight, reading that into the record. And just with the tragedy that has happened, I just can't say enough about that. So just wanted to mention that. And before I talk about COVID, because tonight the council will, fingers crossed, be adopting various budgets and taking various actions. I want to compliment Janet in particular and all of the department heads for the work that they did putting the budget together. It was, I mean, you have a good sized budget at $35+ million, and with the different things that you have going on, and with Power and Light, there are a number of different moving parts that go into it, but I think your finance director and your department heads do a great job representing the city and being good fiscal stewards. So with that, as far as COVID goes, and I'll take any questions that any of the council has regarding that, but as you know, phase 1, Polk County opened under phase 1. So some of the city's operations have opened. The police department and Power and Light have both opened full time with mitigation measures, sneeze guards, and proper protocols for customers coming in and how they interact. But those two are open full time. The city hall is opened 3 hours a day, and we'll probably continue under that. Since we're getting close to phase 2 application, we'll probably stay like that for at least a couple weeks and see how that goes. The library has started to accept, so they're taking books through the book return. They do have a protocol of setting those to the side for 72 hours. Next week, I'm pretty sure it's next week, they'll be opening up for curbside service, and then working towards some type of in-person service at the library. But the librarian is working with the state librarian to ensure that we have sufficient protocol set up for all of that. Public Works, of course, they still have the remodel that's going on, so they won't reopen to the public until the remodel is completed and they're able to rehouse themselves in that operation. And we're working through opening up outdoor facilities now. Play equipment, things like that, I think are probably a phase 2. We're waiting for a seasonal hire to open the bathrooms back up because of the required twice a day cleaning that is necessary for those. And we are getting contacts from folks who, of course, want to use our facilities and the ball fields for organized sports and things like that. So we're working through those activities now. And we did, let's see, two last things. We did turn in our CARES reimbursement last Friday. So Janet got that together. The amount that the city has turned in for is $113,750, plus or minus a few dollars, but that's about it. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hopefully we'll get reimbursed that amount. And as you know, the City of Monmouth and Independence did receive an award through the Business Oregon Grant Program, Business Grant Program. It was a lot less than what we anticipated. We're disappointed about that, so we're going to keep an eye on it. And there will be additional funds released later through a second round, and then whatever Business Oregon does after that. But we will continue to try to increase the award through a later round application. And one of the council's actions tonight is the money that the city was going to use for our Monmouth Business Grant Program. That's on as a supplemental budget amendment that needs to be done. And even though we're going to take in less than we anticipated, I think it would be good to release that entire amount so that we can work through an application process and make those funds available as needed to the business community. And that's all I have. Thank you.
And can you update us then? So we have money to loan and grant, and how are businesses accessing those funds?
So Suzanne, our community development director, has worked more closely with that. I'm not sure, we don't
have it all worked out, but
it's still
generally
a few weeks, but
we have some ideas about how.
Yeah,
Grant
are you guys
application.
talking about how people apply for it
Right.
or how it works?
Right.
So we are trying to set up the online portal with the COG, as you recall, doing the loan processing for us. So we envision, or just trying to keep it streamlined and as easy for these busy business owners as possible. So having just an online portal where they go, enter their information, upload whatever they need, and then go from there. And for the businesses that may not have computer access, then we'll certainly have a paper copy available and it'll be translated into a Spanish version as well. So
Perfect.
yeah. So we are scrambling. We don't even have the agreement quite yet from Business Oregon, but we're anticipating that this week. And then luckily, the 45 days that we have to get those funds drawn down will go from the date of award. So
Okay.
because initially
So
they had said June 30th.
yeah, I
and
was going to say, so
we've
it
already
was
lost a week.
originally, it was June
Yeah.
30th, so it'll push into July.
Yeah, but the folks that may not be eligible, so just to reiterate, these funds are specifically for businesses that have not already received federal assistance. So, there will be a number of businesses that won't qualify. We're trying to get the folks that have slipped through the cracks, and we will have our city loan funds that will be available if by chance, they're not eligible for the Business Oregon loan grant program. So. Yeah.
Okay.
So stay tuned. We'll get it up to date on our website as soon as we have the details for it.
Right.
So yeah.
And
really
then
quickly.
the Council of Governments, Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, will be administering the grants for us. They'll be assisting us in
Yeah.
managing those.
So the awards will be, the grant and the loan go together. So
Right.
when you apply, you get up to 50% of the loan can be forgiven as a grant. But yes, the COG will be administering both pieces of that for us.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
So more to come. That's great. Thank you.
Get my camera
Thanks,
on here.
Suzanne. Are there any questions from the council before I finish? Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phyllis, did we receive any citizen comments for tonight's meeting?
We did not.
Thank you.
However, there is somebody online saying waiting for name. I don't know if they want to comment.
There's also several visitors in the room who may wish to comment. Not in this room, in the Zoom, in the
There's
Zoom
not-
room.
when did they arrive? They
There's
just-
3 non-council members on camera.
Yes.
Okay.
They're here for the CPMA, the hearing.
Okay. All right. So hearing no citizen comments about business not on the agenda, we will move to our business agenda. And the first item of business this evening is a public hearing regarding a comprehensive plan zone change, number 20-01. This is regarding the Ron Wilson Center at 155 Clay Street West and 211 Monmouth Avenue South. And we will turn this over. I will bang my gavel. I will open the public hearing and we will start with our staff report on this issue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council and Mayor. I do have, since this is a quasi judicial decision, I do have a hearing statement that I need to read into the record. So bear with me as I read through this. This is a public hearing before the Monmouth City Council is now open. Need to ask if there's any declarations of conflict, bias, or ex parte contact by any members of the City Council. Okay.
Please indicate, raise your hand if you would like to declare any conflict
Bias
or
ex
issue
parte contact if you talk to somebody about
or
them.
ex parte, right? If you had any kind of conversations outside of the hearing regarding this matter.
I guess we should probably just mention Councilor Carey, as he mentioned in his staff report, was at the initial public hearing. So hopefully, Councilor Carey, you can confirm that you can make a decision based on the criteria present tonight, not anything special heard in the Planning Commission meeting.
Councilor Carey, do you feel you can continue to wear your hat now as the quasi judicial body?
I do. I read the material that was presented at the Planning Commission meeting, virtually the same as is provided here. You know, there was nothing that was surprising in any way at all, and I feel I can deal with any discussion on this equitably.
Cece, I would just point out too that anything at the Planning Commission hearing is part of the record of this decision anyway, so that would be fine.
This would be anything outside of that. So, all right. Thank you. I see none declared.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read the rest of the hearing statement. Oregon land use law requires several items be read into the record at the beginning of each and every public hearing. The applicable substantive criteria upon which this case will be decided are found in the Monmouth City Code, Chapter 18.15, subsections 50 and 60. These criteria are addressed in the staff report and are read or summarized by staff during the presentation of the staff report. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria in the Monmouth Comprehensive Plan or zoning ordinance, which you believe applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties to this hearing an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Any issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised no later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing on the proposal before the city. Such issues shall be raised with and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city and the parties to this hearing adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval without sufficient specificity to allow the city or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The application will proceed with the staff report. Next, the applicants present their case, followed by those who'd like to speak in favor of the application, then those who are opposed, followed by persons neither for or against the application. Public agencies are also allowed to comment, and we just ask that anybody that is speaking before the council to please state their name and address for the record. Okay,
Right.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now I'll go ahead and switch over to just a brief summary of the staff report that was in your packet this evening. This is a request for a comprehensive plan zone change from high density residential to commercial with a concurrent zone change from high density residential to Main Street District. These are type 3 actions where the council makes a final decision, and that decision must be adopted by an ordinance. So we'll have detailed findings that are in the Planning Commission staff report attached to the council memo that will address each of the approval criteria. just want to hit on some of the kind of the high points of those lengthy findings. One of the criteria for the council uses to review and approve comprehensive plan zone changes is whether or not there's a need for the particular land use that's being requested. So Ron Wilson has provided findings indicating that, you know, they've gone through quite the exhaustive search looking for other properties. This has started over a year ago, that they were looking for properties where they may be able to build a new office facility that will facilitate their the number of employees that they've had. They've been in Monmouth since 1974. They are in an older home that's been converted to their office, and they're bursting at the seams. They don't have room for all of their current employees and the services they provide. So they looked at a number of different sites. They asked me about properties off of Eccles Street that are in our industrial zone, and I said that's really not likely that we'll rezone that industrial land there for office use. They looked on the S-curves, which we know is currently getting built out, and there's not room there, and it's also across the highway. Most of their clients that they serve are west of 99. So really the space that they have now, they've also purchased the lot directly adjacent to it on the corner of Clay and Monmouth, is the ideal location for those services that they provide and the clients that they are located more closely to. And it provides the benefit of their employees also being close to the downtown center to be able to patron local businesses in the downtown and help strengthen that downtown core. So a number of benefits from that. We also look at, for our criteria, whether or not the use would be compatible with the surrounding uses. And so in this case, we have kind of a mixture. This is kind of on the edge of our downtown. We just had a recent code change where we looked at changing language in the Main Street district that would allow properties to go through this application process to see whether or not it's appropriate to put the Main Street district zoning on their property, and allow us to grow and expand that Main Street district and further expand that downtown area as kind of our core for commercial services. So this is kind of that first application through that process after that code change has been approved. In terms of the proposed change, we also look at whether or not it's consistent with our comprehensive plan and the goals and policies that are found in the Monmouth comprehensive plan. And so there's quite the exhaustive list, again, in the findings, going through all the different sections and elements of our code. Just would point out that a couple of those policies, the land use policies, actually anticipate the need for some flexibility in looking at zone changes on a case-by-case basis. And again, when there's a demonstrated need for that, being able to apply changes to that. So this certainly seems like an appropriate situation where there has been a demonstrated need for additional office expansion space. In terms of our economic development goals, this is certainly consistent with allowing longtime business in Monmouth to be able to expand and meet those needs. Our economics element of our comprehensive plan actually seemed to contemplate this issue when it talked about the S-curves. Once that commercial property develops, the city will need to work on identifying new commercial areas and to serve those future commercial needs. So here we are. And thankfully, Ron Wilson's been patient as we've been going through these various steps to get that property zoned correctly. But you know, that our comprehensive plan did note that we would need some additional commercial land, and that really the place to go to look for that to help build and strengthen the downtown would be to look at some properties in the vicinity of our downtown core. The zone change criteria also considers whether or not there's adequate public facilities that are available or can be made available. We certainly have comments from the various city departments that are attached to the staff reports showing that, in fact, the adequate public facilities can be provided, or there may be some conditions that'll be placed on the development through the development review process that will ensure we have adequate water, sewer, stormwater, and street facilities. The applicant submitted with their findings a traffic analysis to look at the impact of the change on our city street network, and the findings came back from a traffic engineer that it would not significantly impact the city's transportation facilities. So that's a requirement under the state's, they call it the GPR, the Transportation Planning Rule. And then I think I just lastly would point out there were some comments and concerns we have to look at when we're rezoning property, what we're taking it out of. If we're taking it out of high density residential, are we going to be hurting the city's high density residential land inventory? And certainly with concerns about affordable housing, that is not something that we want to take lightly. And so the city received public comments from the Fair Housing Council. They routinely comment on zone changes that involve rezoning land from residential categories, and they express concerns about what this change, the impact that would have on our housing, our buildable land housing inventory. And luckily we have a current adopted buildable land inventory and housing analysis. So we were able to pull from that to show that these properties, it's actually 2 properties that Ron Wilson owns that are both zoned residential high density. They are not counted as part of our vacant redevelopable supply that will meet our future high density needs. So we can say that there's no impact because of that change. So yeah, so with that, we did get a comment letter from the Ron Wilson's consultant, Jeff Tross, that is also responding to some of the Fair Housing Council concerns. So that's also attached to a report at the Planning Commission public hearing. The Planning Commission's held a public hearing already. Their role is to make a recommendation to council. They held that hearing on May 20th, and they had one public comment that was in support of the city approving the proposed change to Main Street District. It was from the adjacent neighbor, and he had commented, he attended in person. We were able to socially distance, and he commented on what a good neighbor that Ron Wilson Center has been over the years. So, and I think that's reflected in the minutes, the draft Planning Commission minutes that were also attached to the staff reports in your packet this evening. So with that, the Planning Commission staff recommendation is to approve. When you're ready for it, there is a sample motion on page 2 of the report, and the applicant has several representatives that would like to speak to the application tonight. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So unless there are any clarifying questions about the staff report, I will at this time give an opportunity for a presentation from our applicant. And I see we have Marcy from the Ron Wilson Center with us this evening. And also you mentioned Jeff Tross, who submitted a statement in favor, is with us. So I will take the applicant presentation at this time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Jeff Tross, and I'm here on behalf of the Ron Wilson Center this evening to help them present the application to you. So I'll go first, and then Marcy Callinger will follow with some other additional brief comments. And I'd also like to note the fact that with us this evening is Scott McDonald of Studio 3 Architects, who provided the renderings of the buildings and the setbacks and landscaping that are a part of the file in this case. And he's available to answer questions should you have any about the future of the property and what may result if this comp plan zone change is approved. So we thank you for your time this evening and having us on your agenda. This is hopefully the culmination of a process that began nearly 2 years ago now with the code amendment to the MS zone to allow it to be considered on properties outside of its former geographic boundaries.
The code amendment enabled this application to be made, so we're pleased to have reached this point in the process. Now, the application is really about improving housing services for residents of the city, and specifically those who require assistance with obtaining and maintaining their housing. And in that regard, the proposal furthers the city's housing goals and is also consistent with statewide planning goal 10, which is the housing goal. Interestingly, the MS zone includes the provision for high density housing. So replacing the existing high density residential designation with a Main Street designation really doesn't eliminate or lose any capacity for the city to provide housing. And as Suzanne has already mentioned, this property was not considered as redevelopable in the buildable lands inventory. We've studied the current buildable lands inventory of 2019. It was adopted by the City Council in January of 2020, or perhaps it was adopted in 2019. Forgive my error on that one. And it shows that the city actually has a large surplus of land within the urban growth boundary to accommodate future multifamily housing. So the ability of the city to provide housing according to its housing need analysis and buildable lands inventory simply is not an issue in this case. In addition, the Main Street zone would be an appropriate transition, we believe, and a compatible transition from the existing city center to the south side of Clay Street. This property will be used for housing services by the Ron Wilson Center. It'll fit well with the character of the neighborhood along Clay Street and keep the Ron Wilson Center staff in immediate proximity to the downtown core, where they'll be able to take advantage of the businesses there in their daily employment. So in terms of the staff report that was presented to the Planning Commission and summarized tonight, we're in full agreement with it. There's nothing to disagree with. The staff report covered the city's goals and policies as they apply to this case. We, of course, are pleased with the Planning Commission recommendation, and we hope that you'll find favorably for this application as well. With that, I'll conclude my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions, but at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Marcy, who would like to provide a little bit more background to what the Ron Wilson Center does in the city of Monmouth. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Marcy.
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Good evening. As Jeff stated, I am the Executive Director for Ron Wilson Center, and Ron Wilson Center has been in the Monmouth community since 1974. We provide housing and daily supports for some of our county's most vulnerable people, ranging in age between 18 and 75. We have 16 homes that the agency owns or rents right here in Monmouth. So as a result, we are able to provide affordable and stable housing for people who are receiving our services. If it were not for agencies like Ron Wilson Center, people with disabilities and mental health needs would be left without support, and some of them would even be homeless. In fact, RWC just recently offered placement to someone in this community that is in need of our services, who has recently been homeless and is continuing to try and find somewhere to call home. We plan on continuing the work we do for years to come, and in order to do that, we need a safe and usable office building for our administrative staff to work out of. Currently, the building we use for our office is in need of costly repairs and upgrades. So our eventual goal is to be able to have a new building that is safe, conducive for people with disabilities to navigate, and a structure that allows the admin staff the space we need. It is centrally located here in Monmouth to all of our homes and the people we support. So that is why we would like to remain in the same spot, a spot that's actually been ours for over 45 years. Thank you for the time and your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Are there any questions of the applicant? Byron Schinkel.
Hey, Marcy, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks for the information. Currently, how many staff report to the current office every day generally?
So in general, I'm going to say right around 30 people, but it's not all usually at one time. And it's especially not all at one time right now. But yes, in generally, it is about 30 people. I know that historically, it's people can become unpleased with us because of our parking. And I know we do clog up Clay Street, and we recognize that. And so, if you have questions about this, maybe Scott can answer them, or that would maybe be for the design review. But in the plan, we do plan on having a parking lot as well. So part of it's going to be a new building and then a parking lot to help alleviate that problem. But yes, on average, I'm going to say 30, maybe 35 people a day. And it's staggered, it's different times.
Okay. And so will the new, and I saw the rendering and I saw the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
Will the new building, do you anticipate an increase in the number of staff reporting daily? And was that taken into account with that traffic analysis? So all of that has been considered when at the end of the day, when it says no, there's not going to be any different impact on that.
I can't speak specifically to the traffic analysis, but what I can speak to is to let you know, yeah, in general, there isn't going to be a huge increase in the traffic, just because we have a larger building. The building right now is it's a little small for us, but since it is a house, there's a lot of space that's just very unusable. And so it's unusable space. They're bedrooms for our offices. And so with the 30 to 35 people on average that work out of here, it just has become more and more problematic. And in addition to that, we're just in need of a lot of upgrades and a lot of upgrades. And so that's the other part of it. So as far as any time in the near recent future of it really impacting any kind of traffic, it won't. And I don't see that being a problem.
Thank you.
Questions of the applicant? Councillor Carey.
Just quickly, what sort of a timeline are you looking at in terms of when would you like to begin construction on the new building, number one, and number two, would the parking lot be developed at the same time that the new building would be developed?
Okay. As far as the timeline, I don't have an exact timeline. I know that initially we wanted to start looking at maybe doing something in the fall. With that said, COVID-19 has kind of, slowed us all down a little bit, and that has been our main priority now for the last 3 months because of what it is that we do. So it's just been a main priority for us. And so I can't guarantee that we would actually be able to stick to that timeline, but ideally that is what we would like to do, to be able to look at the fall as a time to do that. And as far as the parking lot, what the plan would be is, since we purchased the property next to us, that the new building would actually go there. And so it would actually go there on that corner of Clay Street and Monmouth Avenue. And so the plan, if possible, and from what we're able to know as of right now, it is a possibility that we're able to stay in the current building that we're in for the most part while the building is being built. And then the plan would be to do the parking lot last. So then, because basically the current building that we're in right now is where the parking lot will be. So then we would move into the new office and then have the parking lot constructed last.
Right, any other questions of the applicant? All right, seeing none, if there are any persons in favor of this application that would like to speak, we will entertain those. And again, if so, identify yourself as someone who would like to speak and name and address for the record. All right, seeing none. At this time then, any persons in opposition to this application are encouraged to identify themselves and name and address, please. Hearing none, seeing no indication of speakers in opposition to the application. If there are any other additional comments about the application, I would entertain those. And seeing and hearing none, if there's any other testimony to present or any additional comments.
I touched on the 2 public written comment letters that we received and the 1 oral testimony at planning. So.
Okay, so Suzanne has nothing to add to the record at this point. And no additional questions by the commission. All right. Unless the applicant has any additional comments to make in closing.
The only
Jeff?
comment I might make, Madam Mayor, is I think I failed to give my address for the record. If you'd like that, I can provide it to you now. And it is Tross Consulting, Inc., 1720 Liberty Street, Southeast Salem, 97302. And that's all.
Sorry, I did the same thing. So we are Ron Wilson Center and we're at 155 West Clay Street here in Monmouth.
All right, thank you for completing that record.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions from the commissioner, from the council? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. And at this time, as noted, there is a motion. It is on page 19 of the full packet. I believe that's page 2 of the staff report. And I would entertain a motion.
John's finding his.
Sorry, John. Councilor
Madam
Carey.
Mayor, I move to approve the comprehensive plan map amendment zone change 20-01 as recommended by the Planning Commission and as presented in the staff report, including the findings of fact.
Second.
It was moved by Councilor Carey and seconded by Councilor Belts. And is there any discussion on the motion?
Just to be clear, then this would be to direct staff to prepare an ordinance.
Did it say that? I wasn't listening to his.
It did not say that in the motion.
It did not say that. So I'm going to ask if Councilor Carey, you would amend your motion to include the direction to staff to prepare an ordinance.
Yes, I would ask that we direct the staff to prepare an ordinance.
Thank you. And will you amend your second, Roxanne?
Yes, I amend my second.
All in favor of the motion as amended, and I believe we'll do a roll call on this. Phyllis, please.
Councilor Belts,
Aye.
Councilor Carey,
Aye.
Councilor Lopez,
Aye.
Councilor Sharmer,
Yes.
Councilor Schinkel,
Yes.
Councilor Sobernagel.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. The application is approved, and at a future meeting, we will get an ordinance back to be able to make that zone change and get all of that work underway. So thank you very much again, everyone, for your participation this evening and for what looks like an amazing plan that will really, I believe, make a lovely addition to our expanded downtown area. So thank you, and heavens knows, a long time coming for the fine staff of the Ron Wilson Center. So.
Thank you so much, Mayor and councilors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. The rest of our hearings are in regards to some budget issues. And so again, for each of these, we'll have to see if we have any public comment on them because they are hearings for a variety of reasons. And I will turn this now over, first of all, dealing with our current year before we start looking forward, to our Finance Director, Janet Chenard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and honorable council members. The first public hearing is being held. As you know, we have had several supplemental budgets already in fiscal 1920. This one calls for a public hearing because it will exceed the 10% increase in our appropriations in this particular fund. And so as you saw in the staff report and as already mentioned by City Manager Olson, we are looking at using more appropriations than we had initially designated for a loan program in the Economic Development Loan Fund, up to, in fact, $60,000, which was going to be our match for the Business Oregon grant. Now there will be new criteria, but we would still like to explore having all of those appropriations available. We will tap into 3 sources in order to make those appropriations available as outlined in the staff report. We have a higher beginning fund balance, we have contingencies, and we have a future reserve expenditures. All of this is allowed under local budget law, provided the governing body and the public hearing find in favor. So with that, I would say we can proceed with the public hearing if there are any public to comment.
I will open the public hearing on the matter of the 2019-2020 supplemental budget in our Economic Development Loan Fund. And is there anyone to speak on that issue? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing. And at this time, I would entertain a motion on this item as seen on page 71 of our agenda.
I move that a supplemental budget to use additional resources and contingencies to increase appropriations in the Economic Development Loan Fund per resolution number 1899 be approved.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Belts. Sorry, was there a second?
Yes, I second.
Thank you, Councillor Lopez, for the second. And this would be resolution number 1899, a resolution to authorize a supplemental budget for the Economic Development Loan Fund due to unforeseen circumstances and increased revenues. And Madam Bowman, the roll call, please.
Councillor Belts,
Aye.
Councillor Sharmer,
Yes.
Councillor Schinkel,
Yes.
Councillor Carey,
Aye.
Councillor Lopez,
Aye.
Councillor Silbernagel,
Aye.
passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. And now we will begin the work that we need to do to have a budget and appropriations starting July 1st of 2020. And our first item is with regards to a resolution whatever it's called, to for state revenue sharing. So Janet, once again.
Yes, and this also requires a public hearing for our state revenue sharing election by the governing body under ORS. As you know from budget committee meeting, we have three options of what we can do with revenue sharing. We can choose to elect it and add it into our general fund and our street fund, all of those revenues that come in to help keep our funds balanced. Or we can return that state revenue sharing money to the state, or we can under levy our taxes by the amount of the revenue sharing. It is staff's recommendation that we elect to receive the revenue sharing, since that is, we are using it to balance our budget, and absent doing it that way, we would have to cut our budgets. So with that, we could open the public hearing.
All right. A public hearing on resolution regarding revenue sharing. I declare that open. And did we receive any public comment, or do we have anyone to comment on revenue sharing? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion, which appears on page 74 of our docket. Byron.
I move approval of resolution number 1900 declaring the city's election to receive state revenues in FY21.
Thank you.
And I'll second.
And that was a second. I didn't see who it was. Sorry. You're so far away. Darren Silbernagel. Thank you very much, Councillor Silbernagel. It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution number 1900 declaring the city's election to receive state revenues for the coming fiscal year. And Phyllis, roll call, please.
Councillor Carey.
Aye.
Councillor Schinkel.
Yes.
Councillor Silbernagel.
Aye.
Councillor Belts.
Aye.
Councillor Lopez.
Aye.
Councillor Sharma.
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. And after considerable work by our budget committee, it comes down to a pretty simple action for us. And that would again hold a public hearing to consider and adopt our fiscal 2021 budget. And so we will start with our staff report on that.
Thank you again. So as the mayor says, this can be simple, but of course there are many questions that you can also ask and be responded to. There are several components of adopting the budget. The approved budget that is coming to you from the budget committee totals $38,201,000 and $201,098. And that consists of, as outlined in your staff report, several new positions, as well as some rate increases across the funds. I won't go into those details since I think you have all heard them all. But if you have any specific questions about those, that is the first element, is approving that. The second part is to also approve, please, or I should say adopt the capital improvement program for 2021. You are also approving the 2020 through 2025 document, but it is the first year of that is being formally adopted as part of your budget. And then lastly, we need to do a debt levy to pay for the general obligation bonds, voter approved general obligation bonds for this fiscal year in the amount of $239,500, I believe.
Yes. Correct.
Okay. So those are the three items, and I'd welcome any questions from the public for the public hearing or from councilors.
So I will open the public hearing on the adoption of the 2021 budget and related items. Phyllis, were there any public comments on the budget?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. And are there any public comments from folks joining us on the call? Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain questions of Janet or comments or the proposed motion to be found on page 77 of our docket.
Councillor Carey has a question.
Councillor Carey. John.
Just a, I think, fairly simple one, but embedded in the budget are a number of increases that have yet to be approved by council. Should those not be approved, how will we adjust the budget? And particularly relative to water rate increase, power increase, stormwater utility level, everything.
So without specifically knowing which adjustments you'd like to make, any of those, if you're talking about rate increases, if those are not approved, then we would have to adjust expenses accordingly. If there are other items that you wish to adjust, we can adjust them by for example, if it's a position you don't want to include, we would reduce the appropriations by the amount of that position. And thereby give back to the fund balance essentially. And so those are our options.
And as you mentioned, John, the rate increases themselves would require a resolution from a separate from this, I believe.
So we have in the past done that, but it has been City Manager Olson's experience and mine as well in previous communities that we don't need to do it as a separate resolution. That by adopting the budget with those items stated that is sufficient.
Okay. So any changes would be at this point would need to be addressed rather than adopting a budget in total and appropriating a larger amount than we intended to spend. John.
When this budget moved to the budget committee, there were and the items that I just sort of highlighted. There was not. I didn't hear at all that was a assumption, and that also included the attending rate increases. Should the rate increases be included, this is where we would. This is what our fund levels would be. That's a different understanding than what I had, and I may be alone on that, but that was not my understanding, and nor has it been our practice.
Councillor Carey, so unfortunately, not being here for past budgets, I can't speak to past practice for these types of things, but the Budget Committee did approve the budget, recommended the budget up to the City Council, which included the rate adjustments, the 5% for power and light and for the water fund. There was, of course, I think I could understate it by saying exhaustive discussion regarding the rate increases. If there was no anticipation for it to move forward, we would have asked the Budget Committee to make whatever changes, because as you remember, there must have been at least half a dozen different motions that probably included to reduce the rate increases and so on. So, and my past practice for budget committees in all of my communities are that they are included. So once you take action on the budget, it includes all items that are included in there. And that also includes the cost of living adjustments for all of the staff as well. Now, that being said, if the council were interested in changing the rates, then I think the course would be to come back at your next meeting and have that discussion specifically you can approve the budget and we can come back and make adjustments later. I think that would be one option. I'm not going to recommend that option. I think that as we discussed extensively, the rate increases for the water fund are necessary to fund activities plus the capital improvement program that you're doing, which was substantiated by Deb Ghilardi's presentation to the council. Same is true for Power and Light, although we won't do their rate analysis until part of the FY21. The stormwater one, of course, you do have to come back for that as it relates to the rate. So that does require council action, and that will have to come back to the council. But I think at least listening to the discussion during the 4 meetings, I certainly was under the impression that the rate was accepted after many motions back and forth on what it should be, and the outcome at 5% for those 2 funds.
And I would add, Councillor Carey, you made the motion and the only thing you excluded in my hearing was the police officer. So I was anticipating that you were including the rates as you stated.
I was including the rates that were presented and that we were discussing. There's a number of things we don't have complete data on yet, and you know, the city manager mentioned the stormwater deal. Okay, that's Exhibit A, and I'm glad to know that that's still to be discussed. And I don't believe that the water master plan has been approved and finalized, which includes all of the capital improvements that we're talking about. And I'm not even convinced that I don't believe that the water rate analysis is final. It's in draft form. Now, I'm in favor of this budget, but this is more of a process thing for me. And so I simply ask the question, you know, should the council go a different direction on these things that have that need to be that we're accustomed to, increasing the rates, or in one case adding a new utility altogether, that there would be more in-depth discussion on that. Reasonable enough assumption to assume that these will go forward, but we need to, to me, we need to complete the process. That's my reason for being a stick in the mud and extending this longer than it needs to be.
Councillor Carey, I do appreciate that. So, because the water master plan, the final draft is with the city now, there still needs to come before the council with work sessions and things like that, as you're talking about. That being said, the capital improvement plan that is part of that has been modified in order to flatten the rate increase. So some of the capital improvement projects, just because of this conversation, we have, in this case, flattened that curve in order to ensure that the rates did not go up higher, and pushed out some of the capital projects. We pushed them out in time in order to mitigate that. Now, that being said, when it does come up to the council and the council looks at the capital improvement plan is the primary document that's going to drive your rates over the next 10 years and beyond. You will have an opportunity to have that discussion. Deb Ghilardi's work, she had the draft capital improvement plan. So they're working with, well, I do appreciate the fact that the council hasn't seen the final reports. They are working with the real information. We're not at the we're not at the beginning of the master plan process, we're at the very end. So staff and our financial advisors do have the information. But again, the council will have the opportunity to modify or delay other projects to push them out over time. I just, again, I'll say the same thing I said during the budget, specifically as it relates to the water fund. You have your immediate projects are your water supply projects. You borrowed $500,000 from another fund in order to cash flow the fund, and you didn't do a rate increase last year. And that's how you got through that, was by borrowing money. In my mind, there is absolutely no reason to not approve the rate increase for the water fund. Now, because of the work that's been done with that over the past number of months, I can speak to that real clearly. I'm not able to speak as clearly to the power and light increase because we haven't gone through that rate assessment yet. So I will defer on that to some extent.
And I will say that essentially what you're accepting at this point, if you approve the budget as proposed, as approved by the budget committee, is a 1-year rate increase for each of those funds. And as City Manager Olson says, with the Power and Light Fund, we were able to balance the budget based on that 5% increase. So if we do not do the 5% increase, there would be further cuts in the capital improvement program, or the budget that Director Thurman, Superintendent Thurman would have to make. So that rate increase is a 1-year increase. He put forward a very good argument that I know you all heard as far as the fact that there haven't been rate increases in recent years. In fact, there were 2 decreases in the past. And so that's essentially why we're looking at a 2021 increase. And yes, we may be looking at future increases, but that council will get to weigh in on those.
I would entertain a motion at this point, and then we could have further discussion. And the motion is on page 77 of the packet.
I move approval of resolution number 1901, adopting the budget, making appropriations, levying ad valorem taxes of $239,500 and adopting the capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Did we have the permanent rate in there?
We do need the permanent rate actually.
It's not in the motion.
Is in the resolution, you're right.
It's not in the motion, though.
Okay. I don't believe typically we have included that, but we could, yes. Because it's 3.6107 is the permanent rate. If you would mind amending your motion, Councillor Belts.
I'll accept the amendment that Ms. Chenard just stated.
Tax rate is what the state has given us since Measure 550 to be able to levy property taxes for operating purposes as opposed to debt service. So thank you for that amendment. And is there a second to the motion?
I will second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Belts and seconded by Councillor Silbernagel. And Phyllis, do you need us to restate the motion at all, or do you have that?
I need the permanent tax rate number. I have it, except for that.
3.6107.
3.6107. Okay, thank you.
And it's in the resolution.
It is in the resolution.
Oh, okay.
All right. Is there any discussion about the motion? John Kerry.
To be clear, this includes a 5% rate increase for both water and power and light, and it includes a mid-level a stormwater utility assessment of approximately $16.50. And the only one of those that council will have any discussion about is the stormwater, is the new stormwater utility. Is that correct as I work through the motion?
Yes.
Yes, the
We- yeah.
stormwater rate is still in question. The stormwater utility is still in question. We've just appropriated it in order to, we've used the mid-range rate as a mechanism to provide appropriations that are.
It's a placeholder spot. It was the mid-range, and so the revenue and the expenditures are kind of just built around that. The council will have the opportunity to make adjustments when we pick that up during the summer and through the fall, if you remember that conversation, and deliberately set the, again, as a placeholder, we set the start of this to be October 1st, anticipating the council's discussion will conclude before then. And the position that is included in the budget is dependent on the outcome of the council's discussion, and it's not scheduled to begin until January 1st, 2021. Again, we're trying to create enough buffer in time for the council to have this conversation.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Phyllis, will you please take the roll call on resolution number 1901, a resolution adopting the budget, making appropriations, levying ad valorem taxes, and adopting the capital improvement plan for the 1920-21 fiscal year.
Counselor Silbernagel,
Aye.
Counselor Lopez,
Aye.
Counselor Carey,
Aye.
Counselor Sharma,
Yes.
Counselor Belts,
Aye.
Counselor Schinkel.
No.
Motion passes 5-1.
Thank you very much, Phyllis and team. And we now have some other resolutions to adopt. These do not require a public hearing, but they are part of our annual budget process. So I will turn it back over to Janet.
Thank you. So we are looking at our annual renewal and readoption of our council fiscal policy. As you know, this is looked at annually because it's very important in your fiduciary role as council members that you have a say in how we are fiscally prudent through our operations. And in that regard, there are all manner of policies embedded in here, such as our fund balance reserve policies, such as debt, such as cash policies, such as accounts payable, everything that has to do with our financial operations and making sure that we behave prudently with the funds that the taxpayers and ratepayers have entrusted to us. I have only made some administrative recommendations this round of changes. They are one is to add in the definition of the special payments, which, as you may recall, is a new category to us that we are using in lieu of transfers, which was not the correct category to be using to move funds between the Urban Renewal Agency and the city's finance funds. And so I've added in that definition, and then as well I've aligned the investment section with our actual investment policy. We had some old language in there that I didn't catch last year that needed to be updated to mirror the standards of investment prudence and investment risk and so forth. So those are the only two changes I'm recommending this year, unless there are others that anyone else would like to include. And with that, I would be looking at the resolution number 1902 and having it adopted, readopting the council fiscal policy.
All right. Any questions of Janet on either the policy in general or those specific updates? John Kerry.
Janet, thanks for making the amendments that you made. I think those are effective and important. You know, I would ask the council whether there is any appetite to look at these some of these policies, and particularly in the stabilization fund or the policy, the fund balance requirements over a little longer period of time. Now, if there's a timely nature to getting this done, then we could move on it and then come back and visit it. But, you know, we are requiring that we really operate with 75% of our available dollars. I mean, we're requiring in all but street and general fund, we're requiring that we have a 25% fund balance. As a result of that policy, that is one of the drivers for some of the rate increases that we have in power and light, and perhaps in water as well. The details are sort of skipping by me here. You know, I think one of the things that we can be very thankful for is that we have had this kind of a fund balance policy over the past few years with declining revenue, and very likely we need to continue with that. But rather than just sort of pass it forward out of hand, because we bumped into it a couple times during the budget process, you know, I would personally like to give consideration, a careful consideration as to whether or not that's still the right number. Again, I don't necessarily think that it's not the right number, but when we're raising rates, in part because we're needing to maintain 25% fund balance, I guess I'd just like to have us think about that in a little longer setting than we're going to have tonight. There's no appetite for it, and that's fine. We can just move on, but that's been a little troubling to me.
So, and that's a great comment, John. Obviously, other organizations are taking a look at those kind of fund balances in these times. Often those are set aside as contingencies that are available for us to spend, or they are reserved for a specific purpose. So not always is it just cash sitting around that we don't have a use for, but the discussion indeed is something that is probably very valuable. And I'm curious, sort of the appetite, the two options would be to table this policy review and bring it back for a work session to discuss that, or to go ahead and adopt it at this time and then move forward with a discussion later on, maybe not necessarily immediately, but as we talk about those rate increase impacts and maybe the new fund, might be a good time to really look at this policy somewhere a month or so, a couple months down the road. And I would see if there is any direction either way from council. Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support looking at this a few months down the road and passing as is today. I think that, you know, this does merit review, but I would like to be able to button up the current budget process today.
No, yes, John.
Sorry, Roxanne. Is there a timely nature on this, Janet? Does this need to be done right away, or? And by the way, this would not impact, you know, next year's budget. I mean, this would be a policy going forward with a date of 2021, 22 at the earliest, it would seem to me. But is there a timeliness?
So we do need to readopt a fiscal policy within a year of the prior one. And I personally, as staff, I would recommend that we go ahead with this very prudent and fiscally responsible fiscal policy, but then examine it. We can change it within the next year, in 3 months, if we decide that we want to reduce reserves, or we want to change the character of the reserves to something such as having capital reserves, for example. We call them future expenditures now, but we could have set asides for capital. I mean, there's all kinds of best practice literature that I can bring to bear for a work session, and I'd be happy to do that. As I said during the budget process, we do very well. We've done very well by ourselves to have this level of prudence, but as is also sometimes a contentious issue, sitting on a whole bunch of reserves when the taxpayers and ratepayers are expecting you to provide them with services is also a question. And so, as City Manager Olson has referred to our level of service discussion with regard to your goal setting, that might be another place where that comes into discussion is, if we decide on a level of service that requires that we reduce our reserves in order to meet that standard, that's also ties in nicely. So that would be my recommendation, is to proceed today with this policy, but then look at what we want to do going forward.
I'm comment, and then Chad has a comment for us.
I don't know if Roxanne is.
Roxanne, did you? Sorry.
I didn't hear the first part of that. All I heard was there was a comment. So yeah, I was just going to agree with Councilor Carey and Councilor Lopez and Ms. Chenard. It does seem like we need to move forward with this now, but I'm really curious sort of where the 25% came from. I mean, we all make a decision at some point. I'm going to put 20% of my income into savings, but if I have to start charging my customers more to continue to do that, I have to be able to justify why am I doing that? Is that but then that's for my future. So I understand, but I just want to I would love to get a better understanding of this. So that's my thoughts. Thanks.
Chad?
I was just going to point out that Deb Ghilardi is going to come back to the council, and she would be a good person to talk to about industry norms as far as reserves go, at least with the water fund. So she'll come back, and that would be a good opportunity to ask that question as well.
Right.
All right. I would entertain a motion. As Janet said, I'm hoping we can go forward and consider this resolution as presented and then have that in-depth discussion later on. And I agree with her. If we study it at length in October, say, and choose to make a change then and reappropriate, we are absolutely within our rights to do that. So I will entertain a motion at this time, either the one mentioned on page 151 or some other motion. Darren Silbernagle.
I move approval of resolution 1902, which readopts the City of Monmouth fiscal policy as Janet has modified it.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Roxanne. It has been moved by Councillor Silbernagle and seconded by Councillor Belts to approve resolution number 1902, a resolution amending the fiscal policies for the City of Monmouth and adopting them for the coming year. Any other quick questions on that? Seeing none, Phyllis, roll call, please.
Councillor Sharma,
Yes.
Councillor Schenkel,
Yes.
Councillor Lopez,
Aye.
Councillor Carey,
Aye.
Councillor Belts,
Yes.
Councillor Silbernagle.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you so much, and great conversation about that. We will take that up at a later time. So we mentioned the investment policy, and that is another one that best practice indicates that we review each year And so Janet, if you'll present that for us, please.
Well, actually, if I may, under the auspices of the fiscal policy, I wished to report on the annual risk management report.
Oh,
And
yes,
we
sorry.
didn't give that a separate
I see that.
a separate
yes.
agenda item, but it is, as I mentioned,
Yes.
under the auspices of the fiscal policy. So I did want to briefly present that. You will see on page 175 that we, it's a similar report to what I prepared last year, with some very good results on our claims and any of the damages and liability that we incurred. We are luckily very good with our training and with our good department heads and our very conscientious workers. We have had very good fortune on the claims scene, as you will see from some of the schedules that I included in the risk management report. In fact, the chart that I added new this year on page 177, the loss comparison, was prepared by CIS, our insurance broker, and they show, your color version will show that Monmouth compares favorably under all three scenarios: general liability, property, and workers' comp, with not only all CIS members, but with CIS cities with population 5,000 to 10,000. We are keeping our costs down, I guess is the way to look at it from an insurance standpoint. So that is some good news. That's careful driving on the part of our many workers who are out driving around the community for their jobs, and that's also people behaving responsibly from a workers' compensation perspective safely. And again, this year, I did list quite a few of the trainings that we've done, not all of them. I started off with the one that was requested last year, just to, I think I did get back to you and tell you that, in fact, we did make a concerted effort to have all of our employees take a sexual harassment and abusive conduct prevention training that was very well received. And in addition to that, of course, this year we've taken something that wasn't even an idea this time last year, a lot of COVID training, COVID preparedness, as well as a number of supervisors of course, not on this list, have taken training of how to work with virtual teams. Hopefully that's not a safety issue, but certainly it is from teleworking and all of the different elements that go into the COVID-19. And then beyond that, of course, we have a myriad of trainings that we do regularly every year that are very necessary to keeping us safe on the job. And so with that, I would take any questions you have about the risk management report.
Byron.
I don't have a question. I just want to say very well done to all department staff. The proof is right here that it's well done controlling those costs and controlling waste. So I applaud everybody who participated in all of this. Thank you very much on behalf of myself as a taxpayer, and I'm guessing the other taxpayers of the city of Monmouth.
Thank you. Okay, then moving ahead to the investment policy. And again, this is required under ORS to be adopted annually as well. We do not have to go to the Oregon Short-Term Fund Board for an approval, as is sometimes required under Oregon law, because we have, again, only made administrative changes this year. The recommended changes that I have included this year are to essentially, sorry, it's all a blur now. Yes, actually, one of the changes is very administrative in nature. It was recommended by the auditors that we be explicit in our inclusion of credit risk language. Credit risk language, as many of the other elements of our investment policy, are explicitly stated in the state law, so they are sometimes not restated in our local city policy. Right. However, the auditors really wish to see that stated explicitly in our local one as well. So that was an easy add, because you just pull the language straight out of the state law, as some of the other languages. And many cities do have that explicitly stated, so I didn't have any heartburn with doing that, even though it's, again, just restating what's in the state law. We're not asking for anything more onerous or less onerous. It is literally the state law language. And then the only other piece that I included was the review of the and the update tracking table, because to me that's a very critical piece in any policy. To know what the changes are that you've made in prior years is very helpful, I think, and to know when they were made. And so I just added that to the end of the policy so that you can see, you know, what have we done over the years as far as changes goes. They have typically in this policy been administrative in nature. There is some chance in the future, you know, when we're a $60 or $100 million budget, that we might be doing a lot more adventurous investing than we are currently doing, because we might have to move outside the pool, or as I've indicated in the past, we might move outside the pool if there are opportunities to be had. If it is going down rapidly and we have low risk opportunities outside the pool, we might want to look at that. But at this juncture, I don't see a need for that. And so those are the only two changes that I'm recommending for readoption this year.
All right, so we have that staff report and a copy of resolution number 1903. There is a motion on page 180 that I would entertain. Well, I'll jump at once. Byron Schinkel.
I move approval of resolution 1903, which readopts the City of Monmouth investment policy as modified.
Thank you.
Second.
And a second. Darren, was that you? I can't see
I
this.
think it was John.
I think it was
John. Thank you, John. Carrie. I know. Thank you for getting a word in tonight, John. And so it has been moved by Councillor Schinkel and seconded by Councillor Carey to adopt resolution number 1903. And is there any comment or questions? Phyllis, roll call, please.
Councillor Schinkel,
Yes.
Councillor Lopez,
Yay.
Councillor Sharmer,
Yes.
Councillor Carey,
Aye.
Councillor Belts,
Yes.
Councillor Silbernagel.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Right. Thank you, Janet.
Urban renewal anyway.
That concludes the Janet Chenard show this evening. And now we will move back to the lovely Suzanne Duffner for a discussion of our enterprise zone, an economic development tool that we have and comes up for reconsideration. And Suzanne.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yes, as the mayor said, we have a resolution tonight to consider renewal of the Dallas Independence Monmouth Enterprise Zone. This is set to expire at the end of this month, June 30th. And so we have a chance every 10 years to re-up and continue that participation in the enterprise zone. Monmouth was originally added in 2000 to the enterprise zone. The last update renewal was done in 2009. Enterprise zones, as you may recall from our council goal setting session, talked a little bit about this economic development tool. It provides a tax abatement to qualifying firms that are locating or expanding or making large equipment purchases within the district that will result in increase in jobs. So it's a nice little incentive that we're able to offer. Generally does not apply to non-retail businesses. This is more for the manufacturing side of industry. So unfortunately, based on our economy, we haven't been able to use it a lot here in Monmouth. We've used it, I guess, once in the past for Boise Cascade. But hopefully, if we renew this, we'll have the opportunity in the future with our industrial properties to be able to qualify. So all three cities, Dallas, Monmouth, Independence, the staff are in favor of the renewal. In order to be eligible for renewal, each of the jurisdictions do need to adopt, the governing bodies do need to adopt a resolution agreeing to being included. Because this tool, the tax abatement, does have an impact on the other taxing districts. We are required by the state statutes to have what they call a consultation meeting with the other taxing districts. So that meeting has been held on May 15th. We didn't receive any written or oral objections to it. We just had some questions from the county assessor's office. But we have met that requirement, so we're on schedule for getting our application in on time. There have not been any changes to the boundary of the enterprise zone. You'll see attached to the resolution, there's a map showing which areas are currently included and are proposed to continue to be included in the enterprise zone. And it's generally our industrial zones here in Monmouth, and then also the downtown area. So with that, if there's any questions that I can help answer about that, it's pretty straightforward. Again, it's an important tool that we have in our toolbox to be able to use for supporting economic development.
And what would be the new term of this? Is each one a 10-year?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'd be another 10 years.
Another 10 years to take advantage of this opportunity. And I would ask if there are any questions regarding the enterprise zone. John? No. Okay. Sorry, John. You know I love you. Roxanne.
This is just from my own lack of understanding of this. If, let's say, a piece of property came available at the edge of one of our enterprise zones, the industrial zone in Monmouth, it got purchased and then it became eligible to be you know, a manufacturer of some kind. Does that get added? Do we have to wait until the next 10 years? How does that work?
There's a process that we can amend the zone, and actually properties have been added in the past, just like Monmouth was added in 2000, the Rickreal Dairy, and it seems like some other unincorporated part of Polk County was added. Independence was able to add some newly added industrial land. So yeah, if we go 10 years in that process, we make some changes and we want to include additional properties, we can absolutely go through the amendment process. And so far, I can say the economic development partners have been very supportive of each other's applications for that. So I think that there's a good relationship there to support each other on that.
Yeah, it would require the approval of the other.
It would, yeah. Because it's
Jurisdictions.
amending the legal description in the map, and yeah, there's a resolution that would go along with that.
Any other questions? All right. It behooves us then to consider resolution number 1904, and there is a proposed motion on page 192 of your packet for this resolution requesting the Oregon Business Development Department to authorize the designation of the Dallas Independence Monmouth Enterprise Zone 3 as a new enterprise zone upon termination of Dallas Independence Monmouth Enterprise Zone 2. And this includes Polk County as a sponsor of our zone. A motion, please. Chris Lopez.
I move to adopt resolution number 1904, consenting to the Dallas Independence Monmouth Enterprise Zone designation.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Second. Oh, go ahead, Darren.
Give it to Rox. No, give it to Roxanne.
We'll let Roxanne have that. So it's been moved by Councillor Lopez and second by Councillor Belts to adopt the resolution number 1904 as stated. And seeing no further discussion, Phyllis, roll call, please.
Councillor Lopez.
Yay.
Councillor Carey.
Aye.
Councillor Schinkel.
Yes.
Counselor Sharmer,
Yes.
Counselor Sobernagel,
Aye.
Counselor Belts.
Yes.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our business agenda. Thanks, staff, for all that. I wanted to take this opportunity for council comments or any other announcements at this time. Does anybody have anything for us?
I have one thing.
Laurel, Chris,
Sorry.
and then Roxanne.
Okay, just a quick question. Do we have any kind of written protocol for how members of the community can participate in hearings, any hearings that are coming up, either through the Planning Commission or the council?
Sure. The agenda each time now gives that information. Obviously, if we have to have a public hearing that requires notice, for example, this budget hearing required notice in the Itemizer Observer, for example. And so all of the information regarding how to make public comment was included there. Obviously, we used to just announce the meeting and say that public comment would be taken, and now it includes the additional information that has been included on the agenda. So that's how we're hoping folks understand.
Thanks. But if someone, say for instance, doesn't have a computer or isn't able to join the meeting remotely, do we have some sort of a policy set out yet?
Yeah, it's all mentioned in our agenda. So if you read all the fine print at the top on this, then it does talk about how folks can either join by calling in or by going on the computer. And then it mentions getting the public comments in advance as well, and that this office is open for public comment. So Suzanne is sitting at an actual computer, and that would be available for public to come. And that's all mentioned here in the agenda.
They're welcome in this physical space, and they can send emails in advance to Phyllis or I, and all of those, there are a variety of ways, and we publish it not just in the Itemizer Observer, but on the website, and we have it in the kiosk out front in front of City Hall.
Okay, thank you. There is a hearing coming up for, I think it might be a design review in my neighborhood, and I've been swamped with people asking me about, they want to write letters, and Suzanne, I think you might have received a couple already, and I've been telling them, well, there's going to be a hearing, and they'll say, well, how do we find out about that? So maybe the mayor's notes, maybe some other way of making sure everybody in the community is aware that they can make their voice heard on these particular hearings.
Well, in the case of land use hearings, of course, property owners within certain proximity of the property get special notice as well.
Yes, yes, and we did have one person who is in 250 feet of the property in question, and everybody there's been quite a lot of comments and conversation going on about this, and there are very few people who seem to understand that there is a hearing coming up that they can make their voices heard. So I'm just wondering if there is a better, easier way than just telling them it's on the agenda.
I'm going to call on Suzanne for that for a moment because of the specific issues she thinks you're talking about.
No, I've been getting a number of calls and written letters as well. So just to clarify, it's for a site plan review. So design review is commercial industrial developments, and they do go to Planning Commission, and those do have a hearing. Site plan review for multifamily goes to what's called the Site Plan Review Committee, and it's a type 1 decision, so it does not go to Planning Commission and have a public hearing unless there's an appeal to the Site Plan Review Committee. So Site Plan Review Committee is myself, Russ Cooper, the Public Works Director, and Commissioner Stephen Howard is the Planning Commission Chair. So we review those multifamily site plan review applications based on whether or not it meets the code criteria that don't have as much subjectivity or discretion. And then we do, though, as part of a type 1 notice process, absolutely give notice to neighbors within 250 feet of the property and their public input process. They have 14 days to provide written comments or ask to receive a copy of the decision. So we're in that 14-day comment period right now. I think it ends June 8th, if my memory serves me correctly. So absolutely want to get any of those written comments in before June 8th for the Site Plan Review Committee to concern. But again, it's a very limited review based on the code criteria and whether or not we're applying that correctly. And it would just go to Planning Commission for hearing if there's an appeal. So hopefully that clears up. And if you get questions, absolutely feel free to send them to me and I can help provide some additional clarification on that.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody else had their hand up.
Yep, Chris had a comment and then Roxanne.
And Byron too.
And Byron.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually have two items that I'd like to briefly bring before the council here. I was contacted by an individual who is working on legislative referral number 402, and he presented a number of pieces of information to me, which I found incredibly valuable. This is a legislative referral that is regarding taxation on tobacco products. I won't go into depth here because I certainly am not the best individual to present this. But I do think that it would be a good use of council's time to entertain a brief presentation by a representative from the referral for our information, and would like to gauge support for putting that on a future agenda.
Yeah, I think have the person that's been in contact with you reach out to Chad and we will find a meeting where we can fit that in. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you.
And you had a second item?
Yes, thank you. My second item is regarding the national turmoil that we find ourselves in as it relates to police violence and some of our underprivileged communities. And I'll reserve more of my questions and commentary for the work session at a later date. But I would like to read a brief excerpt from a letter that was published on medium.com by President Barack Obama. It was published yesterday. In this letter, he states that elected officials are those who matter most in reforming police departments and the criminal justice system work at state and local levels. It's mayors, councils, and county executives that appoint most police chiefs and negotiate collective bargaining agreements with police unions. It's district attorneys and state attorneys that decide whether or not to investigate and ultimately charge those involved in police misconduct. Those are all elected positions. In some places, police review boards with the power to monitor police conduct are elected as well. Unfortunately, voter turnout in these local races is usually pitifully low, especially among young people, which makes no sense given the direct impact these offices have on social justice issues, not to mention the fact that who wins and who loses those seats is often determined by just a few thousand or even a few hundred votes. So the bottom line is this: if we want to bring about real change, then the choice isn't between protest and politics. We have to do both. We have to mobilize to raise awareness, and we have to organize and cast our ballots to make sure that we elect candidates who will act on reform. The letter as a whole is incredibly valuable. I find him an incredibly insightful individual, and that excerpt was very much a call to the duty that we all have in our elected positions here. I very much look forward to an in-depth discussion of the matters at hand and how we can prevent, one bad apple from ruining the whole bunch, and keep those bad apples away from our community. Thank you,
Chris. And just a quick lead in there. Thank you for that. But we have positions on our council, and the position of mayor actually will be up for election later this year. And I think we got word that that filing period begins this week. Is that right, City Recorder?
That is correct. Packets can be picked up or gotten electronically tomorrow, but it's going to be done a little different this year. So if you're running, you need to contact me.
So anyone interested in taking on this work, we encourage you to either jump right in or to consider serving on one of our boards or commissions to learn more about city operations, to be able to have those conversations. Thank you for that, Chris. Roxanne, and then Byron.
So my comment is also associated with what's going on right now nationwide. Quite a number of people have reached out to me and asked me about protests and how they can find safe routes to ensure that they're not in traffic's way and those kind of things. So that got me thinking. Basically, I have felt really inadequate and very tongue-tied as I try to understand all of this. And despite feeling like we've all come very far and that we've done so much, we've just got to figure out as individuals and as a community how we can do this better. So my grandchildren, two of my grandchildren are people of color, and I don't want them to be treated any differently because of the color of their skin. In fact, I really want a future where no one's treated differently because of the color of their skin or their age or their gender or their ethnicity or religion or their perceived orientation. And I will be the first to say I don't have any answers, but I'm committed to asking questions, deep introspection, and having those hard and uncomfortable conversations that we all have tried to avoid about race and about our community. So to me, the situation has to stop, but it is up to every single one of us to make sure that that happens. So I appreciate your giving me some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Byron?
As we've had several of these high-profile incidents occurred over the last, it's not just Mr. Floyd, it's several of these incidents have occurred over the past few weeks or months. It really has gotten me thinking, and I've had a number of discussions with my children. And what we can't do as parents is assume our children understand what's going on, particularly in the context of history. I got the question from one of my children, why are people so mad about this? And I think helping doing some research and listening a lot and seeking to understand, despite our position on the issue or how we may feel about the rioting and the other things that are going on, or things that are of a political nature, seeking first to understand and understanding that we don't have what I call immaculate perception. We can't see through everybody's eyes, and not assuming particularly that our children understand why people are so upset, and making sure we have those tough conversations and learn together on what you can do. So a lot of times we just feel powerless and helpless to do anything. We feel bad. We feel, we want to do something, but everybody can do something. And oftentimes it's that something is, you either overhear a comment in a supermarket line, but you're not prepared to respond to that appropriately. So prepare yourself to have hard conversations with people and do your part, whatever your station is. If you influence the people under your roof, then influence those people in a positive way. If you influence people through your job or your city position or your elected position, then do that in a positive way. But again, the big message for me is going forward, we can't correct the past, but we can fix things, hopefully make things better going forward. But we can't make these assumptions that people understand why minorities are having the response that they are having to these incidents. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Byron. Anybody else before we adjourn to the Urban Renewal Agency? Thank you all. I appreciate that. And I do look forward to these conversations, as hard as they may be, both learning more about our police operations and the kind of things they see in our community, and then hearing from people in our community. And again, that's the greater Monmouth Independence community, about their lived experience and what we can do to make sure those things don't happen here. So I will adjourn the Monmouth City Council meeting. And before we do convene the Urban Renewal Agency, and we do have our regular session, and then we also have a what's it called? We also have an executive session, and the executive session will be held pursuant to ORS 192-6602E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. It is and not anticipated tonight that we'll be making any decisions about that. So, but we would return after executive session to adjourn. But I'm going to ask for 5 minutes because I really need to take a 5-minute break. So thank you. So get everybody back. Thank you, Zach. We're ready to go. I would like to call to order the Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency, and ask Phyllis to take a roll call of the members of the agency board.
Mr. Carey?
Here.
Mr. Lopez?
Here.
Dr. Sharmer? Did we lose her? Mr. Schinkel?
Here.
Mr. Silbernagel?
Here.
Ms. Belts?
Here.
Ms. Kuntz?
Here.
There we go.
And
Okay,
Dr. Sharmer? Roll call. She's here.
Here.
Thanks. Yeah, you're just froze up for a second.
My feet are freezing. I had to go get some wool socks.
And at this time, we do have time reserved for citizen comments. Phyllis, did we receive any public comment?
No, we did not.
For the Urban Renewal Agency. And there's no one in the room with us now, but do we have anyone online? I can't see who it was.
No.
these people are. All right. Thank you very much. Then our order of business starts with the consent calendar. The Urban Renewal Agency has had 2 meetings, a very active little group that they are lately. And we have minutes from the meeting of March 3rd, as well as minutes of the meeting of April 21st. Unless there are any corrections to note, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Darren's got his finger.
Darren,
Oh, now he's gone.
Darren, you went away. You turned your video off instead of your microphone.
Helps if you hit the right buttons, you know.
There he
So
is.
yes, I recommend approval of both sets of minutes on the consent calendar.
Second.
John Kerry seconds. Mr. Kerry, thank you very much. Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And the Urban Renewal Agency also has a budget. And oh, look, Janet's back.
Yes, and under local budget law, we will once again have to hold a public hearing to adopt this year's urban renewal budget, which will total $807,340 as approved by the Budget Committee of the Urban Renewal Agency. This particular budget is by category rather than by department. And but we have flexibility throughout the year depending on projects that are developed to make changes in those categories as we need to. However, at this time, our best estimates are included here as far as what those appropriations should be. And again, they total $807,340. That, as well as adopting the tax increment, are what we are proposing as staff. And with that, I would I would say that the public hearing should continue.
I will
can do
open the public hearing of the Monmouth Urban Renewal Agency and ask if there is any public comment on the budget specifically. And seeing and hearing none, I move the hearing be closed. And are there any questions of Janet about the budget for the Monmouth Urban Renewal Agency? If there are none, I would entertain a motion to adopt. All right, y'all. Byron.
I move that we adopt a resolution adopting the FY 2021 budget.
I'll second that.
So sorry, and I guess the motion may not be in your materials, or is it? Is there a staff report?
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the.
Sorry, it is
the
there
bottom of the
because
staff
we
report.
also have to
Declare the tax.
declare the tax appropriation. Sorry, that is on page 7 of the Urban Renewal Agency agenda packet. I'm sorry.
Now, I move adoption of resolution. I'll amend my motion and I move adoption of resolution number 36, adopting the budget, making appropriations and a declaration of tax increment for the 2021 fiscal year.
Thank you. Perfect. Is there a second? Laurel, you seconded, I believe. Do you amend your second?
Sure. Why not?
Thank you very much. And seeing no questions or comments, Phyllis, roll call, please.
What was that?
Ms. Belts,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yay.
Mr. Silbernagel,
Aye.
Mr. Schinkel,
Yes.
Dr. Sharmer,
Yes.
Mr. Carrie,
Aye.
Ms. Kuntz.
Hi. I'm so
Passes
excited.
7-0.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to vote. All right. The motion passes 7-1 to adopt the budget of the Urban Renewal Agency. So thank you once again, Janet. And now Spike is joining us. I think I have to consult with our attorney as to whether or not Spike is allowed into the executive session. He's got his ears covered. I think we'll allow it. Thank you, Spike, for joining.
He's growling, so we let him down.
He can come.
No, he's growling.
Could we have
He's not-
peacocks? Would we
he's not
allow
in-
peacocks in the executive session? All right. At this point, I will move into executive session. We have allowed in the room with us our